Thank you so much. So one, it's been a long time since I've presented live. So this is great. I really appreciate this, guys. I'm going to kick off a new thing I've learned in the pandemic is to add a little gratitude into my days. So one, I'm grateful to be here and for your time. I'm also going to say I'm really grateful that I could find at least one suit that still fits. There was a little bit of panic this morning getting ready. So we're going to talk about UiPath. Thank you so much for that introduction. I'm going to start off by talking about a few different things. I'm going to kind of go from a 10,000 foot view and then also towards the end get into much more granular detail around particular use cases like IVR, call center automation, things like that. But we're going to begin with talking about IT leadership and the CIO perspective. This is kind of coming from a lot of news articles, you've seen several of them captured here, that are speaking around a shift. And the way I like to talk about this is the concept of running the business versus growing the business. And IT, I think in some immature perspectives, view it as just like maintaining the house, just keeping the systems up and running. And I think what we're seeing is a recognition of IT's role in not just maintaining the house, but also architecting it and creating new opportunities for growth as well. And this partnership and this view of the CIO and leadership is going to, of course, roll down into everyone in the IT space. And we see this a lot because we are constantly working with IT organizations. Now, with automation, this isn't just an IT concept. We also work directly with lines of businesses, but always the IT organization is involved. And we can actually create huge value specifically for automation within the IT processes, which we'll talk about in a bit. So a big word that's been around for a long time is digital transformation, right? And this is, many different concepts roll into this. What we're calling out here on this slide is what we've seen as the total addressable market and the revenue tied to digital transformation. It is more than doubled since I've started working at UiPath. And I think this shows that it's not just a buzzword. This is actually where things and initiatives are being run from the top down as well as the bottom up, and they're targeting transforming an organization. I think there's an overall recognition, again, from the 10,000 review, that in 10 years, if you haven't transformed your business into digital processes, into digital systems, into digital data, you're going to be at a disadvantage in the market. And so this is now a top-down, market-driven initiative that really is going to be driving everyone's work and projects. So we're going to step and call out a couple different things here. I'm going to go back to running the business versus growing the business. So in the CIOs, we kind of see these three key responsibilities, right? Transforming your processes, also transforming the customer experience. So this is one of them is kind of an internal process. Call centers are great examples. You might have an internal call center where people call in to help them with password reset, things like that. You'll also have external call centers where customers are calling in for all sorts of interesting problems. And these are things that are required to have a successful organization, relationships with the customer, as well as internal operations. Then we also are seeing this digital transformation. This can be new avenues of revenue, new avenues of growth, new processes. Really the art of the possible and the limits of what can be done with technology right now is no one really knows where the ceiling is. This is the space that the RPA has really particularly played in as this market has matured a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. So kind of digging in a little bit more, we want to talk about a few different concepts here, all bridging those three that I spoke about earlier, tying to technology, data, and security. Now, I will give a little bit of a history lesson as I talk about UiPath and how we've changed. We've always interacted with technology, data, and security, and thus wherever in any of the 10,000 plus customers that we're creating value with, and we've had to interact with any number of different systems, the technologies that you guys are using. We've also had to comply to security to security protocols. So RPA has always been involved in this. And right now we are in some of the most highly regulated banks in the world. We're in the federal government. We're in the US military. We are in the most regulated environments and adhering to those security protocols. So just want to get ahead of that one. I know it's going to come up. Happy to do a deep dive if people want to spend more time on that. Now, as the CIO role and IT in general is now being largely aligned to growth as well as maintaining and running the business, I think it's important to call out 3 different perspectives that we've seen in automation. And I'm going to do a little bit of a history. Back in 2018, when I started at UiPath, I was just a sales engineer. So my job was to go to you. We'd figure out something that you guys hated, something that was really tedious, boring, took a long time, no one liked it. And I would have 2 days under the gun with people watching over my shoulders to show that we could build an automation that would accomplish that with the software robot. That was RPA. And that is actually what I'm going to call out as task automation. That is finding a particular thing that people are doing and creating automation there. This is a great way to move quickly and create value. Now, over the last several years, what we've kind of seen is that if I go in there, sometimes we picked the great process, we picked the right one. But I cannot tell you the number of times that I would finish a proof of concept, show that we could automate a process, and we would learn, oh man, we were sitting next to something that was worth 10 times this, either to IT specifically and to internal operations, or even to revenue or external operations with customers. And this became a really serious pain point, because when you only focus on individual pains and tasks, you can miss out on the strategic value. And so as I talked about the marriage of IT with business growth, and we're going to talk a little bit more about the alignment of those two things, we actually have the ability that I want to call out to focus on process automation. Now, process automation, and I'll show an example of this, is where you look at a larger process that might consist of many different tasks. Within one process, like order, procure to pay, for example, you could have 10 to hundreds of different task automations that we can bring automation in to assist with. And so when you're talking about process automation, now we're generally tying to KPIs that leaders and the people like CFOs, COOs, CIOs are targeting. So this is not just important for them. Everyone who is actually implementing and running this will actually feel a significant change when you're in alignment with the leadership. What we tend to see is those COEs, those developers, those QA and support staff, when they are clearly able to show how what their tasks, what they're doing, ties to a change in the overall process to the business, you now have where we've seen the massive success that RPA has consistently produced in the last 5 years that I've been active in this space. I was a software developer beforehand at IBM. Now, this is what we wanted to do more consistently. And so lastly, I want to also call out that there's a particular view of interdepartmental focus. And this is actually something that the IT space and CIOs are particularly well suited for, because you guys have a line of perspective and a line of sight to all of the different lines of business and processes in the organization. So you guys can actually have incredibly profound strategic impact at an organization, whether again, internal operations or new revenue and growth in the business. So here's an example where we're going to call out a process, a large end-to-end process, order to cash. And we're going to call out many of the different segments of that, which break down into many different tasks. I'm not going to spend a ton of time in here because I've got a lot of content to go through, and I'm going to open to many other follow-up discussions. But what we'll call out here is, as I said earlier, if we just go in and automate a task, a pain point, it's not always aligned to strategy. So we realized we had to expand from RPA to an automation platform, not just the robots and the tools to build those robots, but also, for example, the discovery pillar, where we have many different solutions like process mining, task mining, documentation tools, change management tools like Automation Hub that help us make sure that we are actually automating the right things first. And that prioritization is key to success long-term. And then also so this is the understanding the business as well as the process transformation. We'll talk about some specific examples in this case. One of them is AI Center and DU. I'm going to spend more time here. One of the things that oftentimes IT gets stuck with is someone says, hey, why do we have to have people manually reading all these documents? This is an incredibly time consumptive and expensive process. It's also super error prone. And now everyone knows that AI models are possible. They work. We can actually create serious value with that. The challenge behind AI is that it takes deep technical knowledge to understand how to build those models, and then it's a whole nother animal to deploy them. This is where RPA, even back in 2018, started to really find massive value, because think of the AI models, just a prediction, input, output, as the brains. RPA, when you've digitized a process, is the hands and feet, and you can actually deploy those AI models to have impact in the business. So with UiPath's AI Center and our document understanding solutions, we have tons of ways to actually handle all of the documents that you guys are dealing with. In this case, you know, invoices are what you're going to hear all the time, but I'll show you many other models that we have. So again, cognizant of time here, once you've taken this departmental view, the process automation, and implemented tasks, you now are truly engaging in digital transformation. You're not just solving one person's or a team of people's pain points with task automation, which is really valuable in and of itself, but you're actually targeting strategic leadership-focused initiatives around digital transformation. And so this marriage is where you see the ability to automate is not just efficiency gain, not just error reduction, but strategic change and growth and revenue growth in a business. And so it's bottom line and top line. Now, I talked about RPA. I don't need to spend a ton of time here. If any of you are unfamiliar with RPA, if you've never seen a robot run, come find me. We will set up time. Would love to have you talk to one of my sales engineers or myself, and I can show you how this works. But basically, think of all the things that you do on your laptop today. Clicking through applications, moving files around, copying and pasting. All of that stuff, we have the technology to have a robot do for you. So if you can describe to me how and when you do these things, we can automate it. That was RPA. That's nothing new. 2018, we've proven that this is possible. We've expanded to include these other pillars of an automation initiative. I already talked about Discover, starting in the right place. Now, Build also, I want to specifically talk to you guys about Test Suite. So test automation is also a very known market. And what we've been able to do is release a test suite tools. Actually, I remember back in 2018 when I started, every time I talked to a group of developers, they asked me if they could use Studio to build test automation, because it's a kind of a painful process. And one of the advantages of Studio is the speed of development. And so we now have a fully mature test suite and test automation solution, which can be used for testing your automations as well as application testing. And I'll show in a minute here, we've actually just been ranked as one of the leaders in that space now. And that's taken place over the course of just 2 years. So imagine where we're going to be in another 2 years from now. And we already also touched on AI, deploying and scaling, and AI has been a huge success for us. And we've created a solution called AI Center, which is particularly around the building, deployment, and maintenance of those models. And then it's very easy once you have the model, the ML skill is what we call it. You can just drop it into your robot, into your process, and now it can use NLP, it can use we actually have NER as well, which is named entity recognition. This is for dealing with really unstructured and difficult documents. And then classically, the DU space for semi-structured documents or structured documents, they're a breeze. That we're very happy to hop into a proof of concept with any of you if you have documents that you're currently doing in a way that should be automated. All right. So here we kind of are wrapping RPA in AI. This is just a simple little structure I want to skip through here. Let's talk through, this is an example. I mentioned invoices. There are so many other types of documents and types of AI models that we can bring to the table. And including if you have your own, if you have a data science team that is actually building and models it yourself, you can plug in those into our AI Center and use that again as a deployment and retraining and pipeline management tool. Now, I'm going to kind of come back to the CIO priorities and end this little segment. I wanted to start with the 10,000-foot view. The changes and trends we've seen in IT, the changes that we've undergone as an RPA company or an RPA vendor to becoming an automation platform and expanding our purview from just task automation to everything to have a long-standing and scalable enterprise automation program. And then as those things come together, specifically in marriage with the IT organizations, you can achieve massive digital transformation. You guys are uniquely positioned to have that interdepartmental point of view where you can have wild strategic impact in the organization. Again, if you're aligned to the business and you have that marriage of what needs to get done now with tasks, and it's tied to an overall process where you can have real impact. Now, you've heard a lot from me. I'm gonna invite you to don't take it on my account. You know, obviously I'm a little biased. I've been at UiPath for 4 years now. Absolutely. You can take a look at, this is kind of particular to the RPA space, but they've factored in our automation platform approach now. And we're the leader across the board there. And I happily invite you guys to read that. They will call out areas where we're growing, areas where we're improving, as well as where we've succeeded and what you can expect.
have a question.
Of course.
I have experience with research and also SAP.
Great.
And I found, well, SAP are more difficult than the research, but I know the power. And in fact, we had a hackathon with one of the companies that we work in. Was fascinating because all the people knew how to program. It always easily adapted to these canvases. And you don't just drag and paint and interconnect like emails with Excels, with payroll things. It's just amazing. What is it? Is this a strategy from task process to the digital? What makes you the center, the top? What is it that has brought you there?
Great. That's a fantastic question.
How can you evolve to get there?
Yeah.
And then the others are doing or trying to copy.
Yep, that is also very well said. So I will target going back in time to RPA. As an RPA vendor, we differentiated ourselves. That was primarily around the speed of development. So everyone, including myself, coming from a development background, picking up an RPA tool, I had never seen anything that I could learn so quickly and have such a quick impact where I can watch my computer wake up and start doing whatever I wanted it to. And the speed of development is one of the major things that differentiate us from other RPA vendors. So the entire RPA space shows that, but we massively succeeded. And then we also showed that we had reliability. And that's kind of where we just differentiated in the automation space. And then where we really have anchored ourselves, where all of the analysts agree with us, is the strategy overall. So the first part was execution, and then now the expansion of our platform to accompany all the other aspects of automation. That's where we've differentiated ourselves.